What's going on, workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
Today, based off of y'all's voting alone, we're talking about what Guild Wars 2 should insert into Final Fantasy XIV, or perhaps a better way of saying it, what should Final Fantasy XIV draw inspiration from Guild Wars 2? I have finally hit level cap on my Necromancer, and Chris he outpaced me. He's been doing Guild Wars 2 Fridays on Twitch. So if you guys are either interested, you're experts, you want to help either a noob like us kind of like eke our way through and learn, come and hang out. But Chris, who is our shout out today, and is there a hidden phrase?
There is a hidden phrase, and our shout out is to one player, Pete. Thanks for hanging out on the stream, Pete. Yeah, thank you.
I like the name. I like the name. One player Pete.
One player, Pete.
We also have like Pizza in the Sky. I saw him. I shouted out his name in chat in Twitch chat today because I was like, I love your name. And if I butcher that pizza, I apologize. I just love the fact that you got pizza in your name. Pizza. Calzone. So let's talk about this because, like, honestly, one of the things I've had a very interesting relationship with Guild Wars personally. I played it when it came out, and then Final Fantasy XIV came out, and then I basically disappeared from that game since it came out, and I have come back, and I am absolutely adoring it. And so I started a whole new character. I said, you know what? I don't know what's happening. I'm literally lost, and I don't want to sit here and, have like this high level character experience. I want to start at level 1. So that's where I began. And immediately I start going, those things that I wish that Final Fantasy XIV would do? Man, Guild Wars 2 does that. And it's like, it is so interesting. It's a nice, refreshing change of pace for me personally. Now, is there things that Guild Wars 2 should take from 14? Absolutely. But that's another video that you got to subscribe, hit like, and come back for more in the future. Chris, what do you think? Like, what would be your number one pick for what Final Fantasy XIV should just immediately just copy verbatim?
So I think the open world content is the strongest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's by far the biggest thing that could be copied. I think the open world content, the open world exploration, the ability to go back and just kind of tab through previous expansions and experience them for what they were at your own pace. You have to be careful with that because narratively it lets me jump all over the place, and that can be really disorienting in a game that's even more narrative based, which 14 is. But the ability to say, you know what, let's go back and let's lock new mount cosmetics, this gilded thing. Mm-hmm. Let's go lock, okay, so we have the golden ones come from Gil. Maybe the Ozma skins to all the previous mounts come from going back and finishing old relics or something like that to encourage us to go back and engage with the world. The dailies in that game, I just feel like there's a life that each zone brings, where ARR zones are heavily underutilized compared to some of our more current zones. And even those, they end up not being used. You end up with just nothing.
Right.
Outside, unless something like Ixion's going on or something like that.
So it's interesting to see some of the things that they've already started to move in that direction that 14 has, right? We have instance levels of the zones themselves to help with when you say, like, when there's an Ixion, when there's a server patch, so that players aren't left like, oh my gosh, I can't even get into the talk to the quest giver because of the rush that's happening in the zone. So 14's already adapted that over the course of time. The thing that I found very striking when you talk about open world content is the ease of use of players teaming up and playing together. One of the things that's very clear to me is when you're talking about that open world content, it's like, hey, by the way, your zone's kind of empty. Your zone is kind of like a lot of people have moved out of it. Would you like to move to a more populated instance of this zone? And you can say yes. In fact, they will even give you a buff for doing so because in their design is that they want people to be seen. Now, 14 has answered this with the relic system in the past where it funnels people back into fates in certain different expansions so that the zones feel so populated. Like when we had the relics with Heaven's Words, it's like, wow. And the zones, I think, in 14 are phenomenal. And the zones actually in Guild Wars 2, I would rank as phenomenal as well. And go ahead. They're different. Well,
I think the zones in 14 are more intimate. You actually interact with quest givers. You actually spend time in each hub.
Very true. Good point.
As opposed to everything in Guild Wars 2 feels like a fate. It's come and go as you please. Each quest starts just by being in the right area and ends when it finishes. It pauses at any time. It feels It feels very anonymous, as opposed to 14. I feel like the Warrior of Light making direct stops.
A counterpoint to that is that I think the voice acting does pull me into the story that is going on without having to stop. Right.
That's
so,
true.
you know, like
Voice acting in general is top notch in Guild Wars.
Oh yeah. And it's
There's
like
a ton of it.
And it makes me go, man, I would love to steal that aspect. Now, again, I think when we look at and contrast the two together, like both have their strengths. I don't think there's a winner or a loser in this case. It ends up coming down to preference, and that's why I go, man, like what would I take? But open world content, I think, is key because they funnel people into the content. Because otherwise, if you just design open world content, the risk, especially with 14's current architecture of how zones are kind of, we will instance them when needed. Right. It ends up kind of feeling alone. And to counteract that, they've moved like Boja and things like that into instance-based servers, which have currently their own limitations. So personally speaking, there's a risk, and I want to acknowledge for just a minute, because I know when we talk about sharding or instancing or channeling, how the technology behind the scenes works. I think Guild Wars 2 is a great example of community focused instance open world.
Or open world. Okay, sorry, I was waiting for that caveat.
Because it helps make it easy for people to jump in and play. You're on a different server than I'm on, but yet we're still able to jump in and play together. We don't have to transfer servers. We don't have to jump through all these hoops. It literally the game just handles it. But in 14, we have World Visit. Now we'll have Data Center Visit, which is how they handle it. So I think if anything else, like that system, if you could rip the open world content, but it has to come along with the ease of use of funneling people into that world so that the fates are populated, so that the world is populated. I like 14's style because you're right. I don't interact with the renowned quest givers. I just kind of know, hey, I should be in this area doing something and filling up a bar, which the RPG player in me loves filling up bars. So it's a very satisfying loop. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will say, to Final Fantasy's point, what you described, if you remove the open world caveat there, I don't know if you've done fractals or strikes yet, but finding a group is not always just, easy. It'll just funnel me in.
It doesn't.
There are literally sometimes where I had trouble finding groups for fractals. I was doing some over the weekend. I did them for the first time Friday, and then I got to turn right back around and introduce everything I'd learned to a friend and take him into his first fractals. I'm now 9 agony resistance. So those of you that actually play, still a giant noob, but a lot of that is that I don't have ascended gear. I don't have enough ascended gear to hold slots. So I'm still learning a lot about that, but like getting into a group for strike, it was not as simple as just queue for MSQ roulette and it just handles it. Right. It's not, I'm specifically talking in open world and talking about players that need to find each other. I would say the next thing is the market board. The market board having the orders where when people want things, they can go say, you know what, if somebody will bring this to me, I'll put this money ready and waiting. You deliver it, you'll be paid immediately.
Yeah.
That's really cool. The idea that you can kind of have a bounty board where you say, you know what, if somebody will go farm up this mount from Ishgard Restoration for me,
I'll pay him $5 million.
I'll pay him $5 million
right now.
And then somebody can say, yeah, that seems fair. And they go farm it, get it, deliver it. And what's really neat is when you go to list something, you can say, okay, it's currently going at $5 million for sale, but there's somebody that says they're willing to pay $2 million right now. And so it tells you, I don't have to undercut arbitrarily. I can list at $5 million because that seems fair market price. And if there really is somebody willing to pay a lower number, they put an order in, I can just jump straight to that person, say, you know what? If the best somebody's going to pay is $1 million, I'll put it at $5 million and hope for the best. But if the best somebody's willing to pay is 4.5, yeah, I'll take that. And then off it goes.
What's a real good marriage of that? And when we look at the issues with the 14 market is you don't have, it kind of cuts out the listing at vendor price. Like you see the item is like, hey, you can go vendor this.
You can't list below vendor. It won't let you.
It won't let you actually list below vendor. But it's like, hey, like that's vendor price. List it for something higher than this. So the game actually kind of says no, but chances are if someone's purchasing it, you can decide if you want to list for higher and wait or sell for what somebody's willing to buy. And that I think gives a lot of power to myself, or at least Now, like, I'm not going to sit here and come in as an economic, analyst here, but I feel like as a player who's just playing the game and still kind of trying to figure it all out, I don't really know what things are worth. So when it comes down to it, when it's like, okay, I just want to list that, and the game does throw so much at you in terms of inventory, I often find myself just like, all right, let me just clear this out and hope for the best. I don't know if this is right, but somebody said they're going to...
Guild Wars is dopamine machine, man. They are going to shower you with loot until you feel better about yourself.
I'm going to come back.
And then the crafting systems. Have you touched crafting yet?
No.
That's one of the crafting system uses items hundreds, even thousands at a time, which means that prices tend to be very level because something might have 10,000 of them listed. And so it tends to be compared specifically to Final Fantasy XIV to not be that race to the bottom, because the market kind of can reset itself every time somebody comes through and says, I'm going to level crafting on an alt. And they just buy out all the cheap stuff and up it goes. So it just kind of handles itself.
So one of the things I want to come back to kind of when we talk about the open world design, in a point where I think, I don't know if Yoshi P was trying for this, because he said like no loading screens when going swimming, but then we kind of have that loading transition, in that regards. And I'm wondering if like he was shooting for this, but then when the game actually came out, it ended up struggling. And I think when they transition in, like when you transition from land to water, like how instantaneous that is, and then how that actually impacts your skills. Like it feels like the world has not just this massive map, but it has lots of different levels, and it's so much fun and interesting to explore.
I do not like the swimming.
You don't like swimming at all?
I don't enjoy it. I appreciate what they tried to do. I think execution wise, I find myself doing swimming missions last to complete a map. Because I just put it off. I don't want to do it. If there's an event going on in the water, I'm like, well, good for them. I'm not doing it.
They'll figure it out.
I'm not doing it. Like, well, that event has sweet loot. I bet it does. I don't care. So I do appreciate that there's the rebreather. But I would also be fine with breath as a mechanic. I find that pain in a game sometimes makes something worth it. So the idea that I can just sit underwater, the jump puzzles are really fun. I like the mount system. The ability to just want an infinitely flying mount. There's something that makes the world feel very real and tactile. And I am exploring zones that are years old. And the way I glide and the way I mount makes those feel meaningful and real. And there's a depth, and I appreciate the height. And until you get your glider, the number of times you die prior to getting that glider makes you appreciate that glider. And every time I use that glider, that Breath of the Wild feeling makes me feel like I'll climb up to a high point. I'm working on getting my War Claw in World v. World right now. I'm about 25% of the way there. So I've got my keep, I've got my tower, I've got all those. What I'm working through is the reward track, and I'm at like 5,000 or 6,000 points out of 20,000. And it makes me appreciate everything about that system. It makes me appreciate that when I'm with the tide of battle and the tide flows and all my allies mount up and I'm now the slow gazelle and I get slain and I get tossed back to the beginning of the zone to have to glide my way down. And I couldn't glide when I first got into the zone because I had to re-unlock my glider with these rank points and like all these words I'm using. You 14 people watching are like, what are you talking about? I had to learn all of that. And I learned it offline. I was not streaming, so I was with a friend and neither of us knew what was going on. And so we're just fumbling our way through this system, and he puts a point into something and goes, don't do that, that was a mistake. That point just went to charity. Like I'm just donating that to something I'll never use, and I'm using points, and it just, everything about the system says it can stay meaningful and real long term. And I think that's really, really neat in Guild Wars for a game that doesn't have expansions, that doesn't have that hard reset,
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting things that when we compare it, because when I've talked to a lot of people within the Guild Wars 2 community, I've asked like, why isn't Guild Wars 2 like the number one game? Why hasn't it crushed WoW or 14 or all this? And I think it's like somebody was saying it's like the number 4 or 5 or 6. Like it's in the top 10 of MMORPGs. And the thing is, like, people can say is like they don't really advertise. And the fact is, like, I wonder, like, the fact that it doesn't have a subscription, it doesn't have that kind of guaranteed revenue that happens time and time and time again, that has led to this weird inconsistency in content. So when you look at it, End of Dragons is coming out this year, we assume, but we'll know more in July about this next expansion. That's the third expansion, and 14 is like a machine. It's well oiled. It's, you might, people who've been on the machine for a long time, it's like, yeah, it's kind of predictable, and that's what makes it exciting whenever they kind of say, oh, and we also thought about doing this big thing that we didn't tell you about until today, But it's like they deliver content on a consistent schedule, and they deliver it well. Like there's costs to that. We've covered that in previous videos. We talk about balance. We'd like to see more specializations and ways that you can build out your character. That was something I think a lot of people would really kind of like enjoy. But
at what cost, though?
There's a balance cost, which could impact the raid cost, which could mean delays or less content. And then I don't think anybody wants to pull the trigger on that. I don't think I would want that to happen. I think people are getting what they're excited about, and so you know what you're getting. And that's where 14, I think, easily takes the cake when it comes to Guild Wars, is that consistent content. We're getting an expansion this year, and in 2 years, chances are we're getting another expansion. Yoshi P will be coy about it. It's a fun little game we all like to play, but at the end of the day, like, that's what it is. I could go into build diversity. Maybe that's a video for a future. I could go into like PvP. Maybe that's another video for the future.
Combat and the PvP are two completely different topics.
Yeah, but one of the things I think is just the striking thing that hooks me, that just makes me appreciate my time playing, is that open world content, is that PvE content, is that exploration, and is the fact that whenever I'm playing in the open world, I never feel alone. Even if I'm playing just by myself, I always feel like I'm seeing other players run around, that we come together for these events, and then we kind of go about doing whatever we were kind of working on in the zone. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that when I see it in 14. I appreciate that when I see that happening in games. And that to me means a lot, even if we're not. And then we all are interacting so far in the markets. I haven't found too much gear that is bind on equip or bind on pickup or something like that. So I don't even know if it exists.
There's some account bound stuff.
Yeah, soulbound, I think is the term. Yeah.
So it's account wide is the typical. They're coming up on a change with the next expansion where some of those legendaries are going to go into more of a shared slot instead of having to transfer via bank. So we're even moving one step more comfortable than that. But account wide effectively acts in the same way that your armory chest does in 14, where if the other class can use it, there it is.
Yeah, so that's what I want to see. Anything else that you want to kind of touch on before we wrap up this post?
No, I mean, I do think that there's a lot to be appreciated about 14. So this is not meant to be like, Guild Wars has a lot it could learn from 14. We could turn this video around and record it the other way.
Hit that like button. If we get something ridiculous like 1,000 likes, we'll do it right now.
So I think there's it definitely goes both ways. It's an interesting comparison because you find some of the same things come up going both ways as come between Guild Wars and WoW, or WoW and Guild Wars. A lot of those three kind of form this triangle if they're the only three games in the room, where you find that it tends to be two do this thing this way and one does this other way. Guild Wars has events coming in game. They have things like that. I don't know if they do anything like WoW just did a big charity stream to donate to stuff. And then 14 partnered with Butterfinger, which doesn't feel quite as meaningful because the Butterfinger thing is going on right now. So if you're an NA and you buy $5 worth of Butterfingers, you can get yourself a mount if you're one of the first 200,000 people to go turn in your code. Otherwise, some group of people just bought Butterfingers. I hope you like them. And so that doesn't feel as meaningful as like a charity giveaway with WoW, but then WoW got in a lot of hot water for that. And so like, I don't know how that works in Guild Wars. So a lot of this is we're new, and this is our initial impressions of what we already can tell about Guild Wars. Wow, I wish 14 could learn from that, and the other way around. Yeah. That's really
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this post. Let us know what you guys would like to see them pull from Guild Wars and put into Final Fantasy XIV. And also, if you guys want us to make the reverse of this video, sound off a little preview. I like controller support, like 14. All right, you know the preview, guys. So if you guys want to see that, let's make that video. Be sure to hit that like button. And also, be sure to weigh in on these polls. You'll see them on the community tab. And if you're hanging out with us live, you can always use the command poll to be getting up caught on the latest. And we got a lot of exciting stuff planned for this week. But for Work to Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris. Thank you, One Player Pete. The word of the day was charity. And
okay, I was going to ask a second ago. I was like, I didn't catch any of it. You got that through completely hidden. Completely hidden. All right.
It was used 3 times. So take care.
I missed that. All right, take care, everybody. Love your faces. See you next time.